Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our 6-week Bible study in which we will learn and explore the power of 6 biblical women. I want to first thank Pastor Green for this opportunity to be with the women of Allen as we take this journey together. And so I have selected 6 women from the Bible, and I have identified important lessons that I think are significant for us, because I believe that these women exemplify some characteristics that will help us live some empowered lives. Now, some of the women that I have chosen, I'm sure are familiar to many of you, if not all of them. But it is my hope and my expectation that some of the lessons that I share and some of the insights that I give will still meet you where you are, and that you will be challenged, that you will be encouraged, might even be a little bit convicted. But I believe that conviction is good news, because conviction means that God has not given up on us and God is giving us another chance. So tonight I want to jump in, and our first person is Hannah, and we're going to look at the power of a praying woman. Hannah's story is found in 1 Samuel chapter 1. And that chapter is pretty long, so for the sake of time, I'm not going to read the whole thing. I will begin by sort of giving a bit of an overview, and then we'll be looking at some selected portions of this particular story. I have chosen Hannah not simply because prayer is important and that we should indeed be praying women, but about what Hannah shows us about prayer and activity around prayer. In Hannah's story, I want to highlight her perspective that is gained through prayer. I also want us to be able to look at how prayer helps her set priorities and the practical aspects of what she does following her prayer petition. So, cliff notes, background story. The story begins by introducing us to Elkanah, who is a man who is married to Hannah, and because the society is polygamous, he is also married to Peninnah. Peninnah has several children by Elkanah, but Hannah has none. She is childless. And it's the custom of this family to go year by year up to the temple in Shiloh, where Eli presides, the prophet, and to make sacrifice. Every year that they go up, Elkanah gives Hannah a double portion because he loves Hannah, and he gives Peninnah just the regular portion for her and her children. Peninnah provokes and irritates Hannah to the point of Hannah no longer eating, weeping bitterly, and it's all around the fact that Hannah is childless. But on this particular year that they go up, something different happens. So in 1 Samuel chapter 1, verses 9 through 11, these words are found. Now after they had eaten and drunk at Shiloh, Hannah rose and presented herself before the Lord. Now Eli the priest was sitting on the seat beside the doorpost of the temple. She was deeply distressed, and she prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. She made this vow: O Lord of hosts, if only you would look on the misery of your servant and remember me and not forget your servant, but will give to your servant a male child. Then I will set him before you as a Nazirite until the day of his death. He shall drink neither wine nor intoxicants, and no razor shall touch his head. I don't know what was the moment or the thing that triggered Hannah to do something different about her situation, to make a decision to no longer put up what she had been putting up with and decide to seek God for a change. But what we do see in this passage is that something happened, whether it was externally or internally, that on this occasion, at this time, when she goes to the house of worship, she decides to no longer let what Peninnah is saying and no longer let her situation cause her to continue in a point of distress without first offering it to the Lord. So for this lesson, I want to lift up 7 lessons that I think we learn from Hannah. And the first one is we have to learn that the fight begins on our knees. that as long as Hannah continued to put up with Peninnah's taunts and her provocations and her irritations, things continued moving the same way with no change. But when Hannah decided to pray, she actually went into battle. And not just simply in battle against Peninnah, and not simply in battle just to get what she wanted, but I think she went into battle in such a way that it strengthened, it positioned and repositioned her as a woman to deal with difficult situations. The reason why I tell us to begin fighting with our knees is not to just give you the cliches of how we need to pray and we need to pray until something happens, and as Christian women we need to pray. All of those things are well and good. But one aspect of prayer I think that we sometimes overlook, especially as women, that is crucial, is that prayer is a way for us to show up as us for us. Let me say that again. Prayer is a way for us to show up as us, not the way people are comfortable with us, not the way that people expect us to show up, not having to be embodied in a particular kind of way, look a certain way, speak a certain way, act a certain way. In prayer, we can be fully who we are and we can show up as ourselves. And not only can we show up as ourselves, we can show up for ourselves. We have an opportunity to center our needs, center our concerns, center our burdens, center whatever it is that we are going through. And it doesn't matter if it's petty. It doesn't matter if it's big. It doesn't matter what it is. It is our space and our place in the presence of God to present us as us and whatever else we want to bring into that place. And I think that is critically important because so often as women, we show up for other people. We show up to present their burdens. We show up to help them in their situations. We show up in order to make a change. We show up for individuals. We show up for communities. Y'all, we show up for the nation. And so in prayer, here's a chance for us to show up for us. And that's not selfish. That's not self-centered. It is simply the fact that we live in this world and we need and deserve a place to get what it is that we need, and to do that in the presence of God. So that when we pray, y'all, when we fight on our knees, it's not just simply fighting against something or someone. It's actually fighting for ourselves. I believe that when we get on our knees to fight and we come before God for us, as us, it is a way of fighting for our dignity, fighting for our value, fighting for our esteem, fighting for our sense of worth in a world that often does not value us. When we come to God before prayer, we are intrinsically valuable. We are already worth it all. We are already created in the image of God. There's nothing we have to prove to God. Our value and our worth is a given before God and in the presence of God. And so Hannah begins at some point decide she's no longer going to just take it, right? She's just no longer going to try to resist it of her own power and her own strength. But she decides to fight on her knees when she decides to go up to Shiloh and not just fast and not just weep and not just boo-hoo over the situation, but to actually present herself and pray to God. To fight on our knees means, y'all, that we have to know where to show up. That so often we're showing up in places and spaces that are of no benefit and can give us no help concerning the situations that we find ourselves in. Quit running hither to yon, pillar to post, and nowhere to show up. And the first place I'm encouraging us to show up is in the presence of God. Show up in a place and in a space that you can connect to God. A prayer closet will do. Create a place. It could be a chair. It could be in your car. Wherever it is where you're not fighting to get through to God, right? Wherever it is where you're not having to do a whole lot of work to just be in the presence of God. Identify a place. Begin to saturate that place in prayer. So that prayer becomes an automatic, that when you get to that place, you get to that space, when you sit in a particular posture, when you take those couple of breaths, you have already trained your mind, your body, and your spirit to connect to God, so that when difficult situations come, you are not struggling to get into the presence of God, even as you're struggling with all the things that you're dealing with. Know where to show up and know who to talk to. So often we're doing a whole lot of venting, a whole lot of complaining, a whole lot of unloading. Make sure that we're also doing a whole lot of praying. Make sure that these conversations that we are directing to people, and even internal conversations that we are having with ourselves, that we want to make sure that we are having the conversations that we need to have to God, and know that we have to enter a place that is just not an echo silo, right? It's just not a place where either by ourselves or with other people, we are just hearing ourselves or hearing somebody else repeat back to us what it is we've been saying, or simply co-signing what we are saying. Part of going to God in prayer, part of fighting on our knees, is also being in a position to hear what it is that God has to say about us and or our situation, because the Holy Spirit is not just going to repeat back to us what we want to hear, not just simply co-sign all the things that we are saying. That may be the case, and the Lord will encourage us, but also the Lord will say some things to challenge us, even convict us, some things to deal with us. Because here's the thing, y'all, when we find ourselves in difficult situations, we go before the Lord, especially when we're dealing with opposition that's coming in the form of a person, right? And we go to the Lord concerning that petition. It is so easy to focus on everything they're doing, or everything they're not doing, or all the things that are wrong concerning them. And when we get into our little vent sessions and we get around some of our friends, then sometimes they co-sign and are like, girl, you're right, they're this, and that. And that may be the case. But when we go before God, God's also going to deal with us. And sometimes we need to be dealt with, so that even when God delivers us from a particular situation, we are ready to walk in what it is that God has for us. So she knows who to talk to. It's also important to go to God, to begin fighting on our knees, so that we do not allow the interests of others to dominate our prayer, our lives, our mind, our situation. It kind of goes back to what I was saying about prayer allowing us to come before God for us and as us, because prayer provides this space where we don't have to worry about what anybody else thinks about what we're praying about. We don't have to worry about how they may perceive it or how it may affect them. We can allow God to handle that and just be us dealing with us in the presence of God. Because if you go up a few verses in this passage, before Hannah goes to eat and drink at Shiloh and all of this, she's weeping bitterly, and her husband Elkanah comes up to her and he says something to the effect of, why are you weeping and crying? Am I not better than 10 sons to you? Like, why are you weeping? And pretty much Elkanah is saying, aren't I enough? Like, why should you have a lack over here because I'm right here in front of you? And sometimes that's what happens with people. People will center themselves in the midst of our pain. And it could come from a good-hearted place, because they can't solve it, because they can't fix it, because they feel bad about it. They try to be the solution to it, and sometimes they are not the solution. And if we don't go to that place and space before God, then we lose sight of what it is that is hurting us. We lose sight of what is empty in us. We lose sight on perhaps some of our dreams and our visions, because they've already decided that what we have is enough for them, and therefore it should be enough for us. Elkanah has these children by Peninnah. Elkanah has his 2 wives. Elkanah is satisfied with Hannah just the way she is. So on one hand, congratulations, Elkanah. That is beautiful that you see her worth and you see her value, but her desires do not necessarily have to line up with your desires. She can't just simply want what you want. She might want some things that you are not pressed about at this moment, and she has the right to go before God about those things. And so sometimes this praying on our knees, this fighting on our knees, or whatever prayer posture you assume, allows us to be in the presence of God and not put everybody else's needs, wants, desires, and perspectives on us, but for us to be honest before God and put those things before God. The second thing we see in this passage here, Hannah's deeply distressed. She prays to God. She weeps bitterly. And then she's going to make a vow. And in here, I see that Hannah puts Peninnah in her place by going over her head. That's the second lesson, y'all. We've got to learn to put Peninnah in their place. Now, I don't know what your Peninnah is. Your Peninnah could be an individual. Your Peninnah can be an institution. Your Peninnah could be a group. Your Peninnah could be a government. Your Peninnah could be a problem. Your Peninnah could be pain, could be heartache, heartbreak. Whatever your Peninnah is, we have to put it in perspective, and we do that by going over Peninnah's head. We do that by recognizing that no matter how big Peninnah looms large in our view at this moment, how it may seem that no matter which way we turn, Peninnah is there and we cannot escape it. What Hannah shows us is we've got to go up, we've got to go over Peninnah's head. And Hannah does that through her prayer. Her prayer recognizes that Peninnah is not in charge, that Peninnah is not the one who can give her the child. Peninnah isn't the one who's going to make this situation well. One, because Peninnah doesn't want to. Peninnah benefits from Hannah's lack and her childlessness, and because Peninnah just can't do it, right? So Hannah, when she goes to God to prayer and offers to God that petition, it is a recognition that God and not Peninnah has the power over Hannah's life and has the power concerning whatever it is that Hannah stands in need of. And the one thing that I really want to impress upon us, y'all, is we've got so many big issues and so many things that are confronting us right now. So many big things, and who knows what more may come. But part of the trick of the enemy, part of what Peninnah wants us to do, is to make our world so small that we think that Peninnah has the power to run it. To make our world so small that we really think Peninnah is in charge, that nobody can overrule Peninnah, that what Peninnah is saying is the truth, that what Peninnah does and mocks and how Peninnah feels about us is how we should feel about ourselves. That's what we are dealing with right now. We are dealing with policies and procedures, and we are dealing with decisions that are being made and propaganda and lies that are being told to make us believe the lies that people are saying about us, to make us look through the evil, the malignant, the ugly lenses that people choose to look at us through, to disregard ourselves and think so that we think that we are worthy of their disregard, that what they do we deserve, because we start seeing ourselves as insignificant as they see us. And Hannah instead puts Peninnah in her place by going to a place of prayer. What Hannah needs to do, and I think what her praying does, is to get herself out of the way or beyond the pale of Peninnah's provocations and irritations, so that Peninnah is no longer the center of Hannah's focus or attention. That it's no longer about what Peninnah is saying or what Peninnah thinks about her, but now it's about what she thinks about herself and what God thinks and will do about her particular situation. Because, as I said before, Peninnah has a vested interest in Hannah remaining where she is, unable to think change is possible or see a change, so that she doesn't pursue the change. And so what's interesting here is that Peninnah moves out of the story once we get to verse 9. Once we get to this place where Hannah is praying and seeking God, it's no longer about Peninnah. She's gone over Peninnah's head to the point that Peninnah no longer matters. And so getting into the presence of God and going over Peninnah's head allows us to reassert what we think about who we are and what we think we can have and what we want, and reconnecting with our dreams and our visions and reconnecting with the version of ourselves that God says, this is who you are, this is who I see, this is who I have created you to be, without that being influenced by Peninnah. When she goes over Peninnah's head, that's the last we hear about Peninnah. And here's the thing. It's not that Peninnah disappeared. Peninnah still was married to Elkanah. Peninnah still will go up with them every week. There's no need to think that, God magically moved Peninnah away. I think the reason why we don't see Peninnah anymore is because she no longer occupies the focus of Hannah's attention. And y'all, sometimes Peninnah's not going to be moved. Sometimes you're going to see Peninnah every single day. Sometimes you're going to live with Peninnah. You're going to work with Peninnah. Peninnah's going to be your boss. Peninnah's going to be in the classroom with you. Peninnah's going to be on the pulpit with you. Peninnah can be anywhere, right? The solution isn't always that Peninnah gets physically removed. The task is, y'all, to go over Peninnah's head, so Peninnah no longer occupies the space that Peninnah once did in our heads and in our hearts and in our focus and vision. And then the third thing we see here is that motives really matter. So when you look at Hannah's prayer, right, there's a whole lot of reasons why she could have prayed for what she prayed for. But continually through her prayer is this language of her being God's servant, and how if God would grant her a child, she would offer that child in service to the Lord. The motive behind the whole praying and her beseeching of God is for her to serve God as a mother who bears this child, serve God as this faithful individual who will give her child in service to the Lord. And the thing about it, what occurred to me is that there's a whole lot of other reasons why Hannah could have been praying. She could have been praying because, she wanted to assert her worth as a woman and as a mother in that particular society, which would have given her greater social standing. Perhaps she wanted to do it as a clap back to Peninnah, like, Lord, let me get pregnant, like deep down thinking to herself, if I get pregnant, I could show her, I could let her know that she can't have a one up on me on this thing. She could have done it out of some kind of insecurity with Elkanah. Sure, he was fine with her just the way she was, and he loved her, but maybe in her mind, she could have been thinking, I just want to seal the deal, right? Like maybe after a while, he won't love me as much as he does, and he'll love her more because she has the children and her children were inherited. And what will that mean for me? But instead, Hannah's motives are about what she can do in service to God. Y'all, our motives steer our prayers. Now, here's the thing that I want to say. Sometimes the prayer may Sometimes our motives may steer our prayers in the wrong direction, but even that is helpful because God can redirect it if we have the humility and openness for God to do it. Sometimes we have to come to terms with the wrong motives. Sometimes we have to come to terms with the things that we say and pretend that we don't want or we know or think is wrong or whatever. We try to hide it from God and hide it from ourselves. Sometimes it's about articulating those things in prayer, being honest with ourselves and being honest to God so that God can redirect our motives so that we can move and begin praying in the direction of God's will so that we can get to the outcome that we really want to see. And that's the thing, y'all, that sometimes what leads us to a place of prayer, right? What leads us to this fight on our knees is we have a desire for something, but we have only scratched the surface of it. We haven't gotten to the root of it. So if God answers the superficial prayer, it's still not going to be what we wanted, right? Because what we wanted was to be happy, but the singular way that we identified how we could be happy isn't going to do it. That there are more than one ways for that to take place, right? So Penina doesn't just focus on, I want to please Elkanah. Well, there's a whole lot of ways you could please Elkanah without having a child. I want to show Penina that I am a woman or get back at Penina or whatever. Well, you could get a child and then are you going to use the child as the weapon against this woman? Like, what does that mean for the kid? Or I just want to show, Penina who I am and what I could do. Well, maybe the Lord will open up another opportunity. I mean, she's already seeing it by the fact that Elkanah loves you so much and that doesn't yield a child. She had to get to the root of it. And the root is she wanted a child, not for Penina, not for Elkanah, some for her, but also to offer this child in service to God. Hannah teaches us that motives matter and we should get to the root of ours. And sometimes it's going to be some digging and discerning by being honest before God concerning some things. Pray the ugly things, y'all, so that you can get to the true things. When I get up to preach, there are certain places where, when I'm there and I'm preaching, and it's not that one place is better than another at all. I'm not saying that I prepare for 5 as I would prepare for 5,000. But the implications of what happens in that place, right? Whether Flunk walks in the door with the 5 may have different ramifications for me if Flunk walks in the door for the 5,000. And that's just real talk because this is ministry and it is service to God and all of that. It is also my profession. It is also my livelihood. It is also what I have prepared for, right? And I have to be honest about that when I find myself in certain settings, when I kneel down to pray before I get up to preach or to give a lesson or whatever. It is in those places where I have to deal with my motives. And I confess before God, God, I really want to do well because I want to do well. I don't want them to think that I'm bad at this or that I've messed up or leave dissatisfied. Like I have ego invested in this, God, but I need you to move ego out the way. I need you to purify my motives and my intentions that I might seek you and that I might do this for your glory and for the good of your people. Move me out the way. All of my desires, all of these motives, all of these intentions that don't line up with who you are, cleanse and purify my heart that I might stand before you acceptable. And that my ear will be attuned to your spirit so that I will not preach and teach for the applause of people, but I will do it because I have heard a word that comes from you. Y'all hear what I'm saying? And so prayer helps us to get to the root of our motives because our motives matter. And sometimes to get our motives in the place they need to be, we got to pray through the motives and the intentions and the desires that we know need to be uprooted and not be there. Okay, so after she has continued praying and is really beseeching God, Eli comes and pretty much reprimands her because her mouth is moving and words aren't coming out, and so Eli mistakes her for being drunk. And Hannah has to tell him, I'm not drunk. I'm a woman who is deeply troubled. She says, I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but have been pouring out my soul before the Lord. Do not regard your servant as a worthless woman, for I have been speaking out of my great anxiety and vexation all this time. Then Eli says to her, Go in peace. The God of Israel grant the petition you have made to him. And she said, Let your servant find favor in your sight. Then the woman went away and ate and drank with her husband, and her countenance was sad no longer. Lesson number 4, prioritize your peace. I am struck by how Eli tells her to go in peace, and when she leaves a different woman. She leaves eating after refusing to eat and drinking. She is with her husband. Her countenance is no longer sad. Prioritize your peace. Reverend, what do you mean by prioritizing my peace? Here's the thing, y'all. You may not get a resolution, but you can get a release. In prayer, you may not get a resolution. You may not drop on your knees and pray and weep before God and everything is magically okay and you have a word and the situation is resolved as soon as you stand up. You may not have a resolution, but your lack of resolution doesn't mean that you can't have a release in prayer. It doesn't mean that you can't let go of the burden and the thing that is troubling you and find a space of peace in order to continue living your life, right? Even though you will come back and you will pray, even though you may continue to seek God's face, even though you may have to persist in these particular things, even though the release only lasts a temporary amount of time and you find yourself picking it up again or somebody dumping more on you and you've got to go before the face of God again. Just because you don't have a resolution doesn't mean you can't have a release, doesn't mean you can't find a space of peace to occupy so that you don't have to be overwrought and overburdened until the prayer is answered. You can live in peace and you can be peaceable. So her situation doesn't change, but she's not funky with Elkanah. Right? Her situation hasn't changed, but her countenance has. And I'm not saying you got to leap over walls and sing and dance and pretend to be ecstatic, elated, and happy. I'm not saying that, but we can find a place of peace. And so I'm encouraging us to release what we need to in prayer so that we can get up with a level of peace, to have the courage to leave it all there. What do you do, or how do you leave it there? Do you have any particular ways that you do it? And you can kind of share some of these things in the chat if you found some ways to do it, right? So for some, it may be traditional prayer. For some, it is, I like to listen to listen to religious music, gospel music, or even sing a hymn and let those things become my prayer, because as I do, I can feel my spirit lift and it gives me the words to release some things that perhaps I didn't even know I was carrying, or the extent to which I was carrying. Or for me, I journal, right? And so when I'm doing my journal, part of my journaling is I'm going to write 5 things that I'm grateful for, and then I just start dumping everything, right? Whatever it is, no matter how big or small it is. It could be like today where I was waiting for the person to come to do a service, and they always give you like a certain 4-hour window, and I didn't have the 4 hours to wait around. I really needed them to come in a certain place within that window. Well, in the morning, I just put that there. Let the people show up during this time and this time, or I'm just worried about this, or I've got all these different things that I need to do, and I'll just list them out before God and ask him, give me clarity or give me direction. And I feel like when I write it down, I don't carry it. Like that act of writing is like I placed it somewhere, so now I don't have to carry it in my head to remember it or to fret over it or to worry about it. So you have to prioritize your peace. After she gives this prayer and has this interaction with Eli and walks away, joins her husband and has a countenance, is no longer sad. It says in verses 19 and 20, they rose early in the morning and worshiped before the Lord. Then they went back to their house in Ramah. Elkanah knew his wife Hannah, and the Lord remembered her. And in due time Hannah conceived and bore a son, and she named him Samuel, for she said, I have asked him of the Lord. 2 things there, y'all. Lesson 5, make sure you worship. Not only praying, but continue in a posture of worship that continues to elevate your thought and your spirit above the fray of everything else that is going on, to recognize God above it all. And so it may not be a prayer, it may not be necessarily a petition, but it is okay for it to be an act of worship and recognizing who God is. Worship reminds us who God is, even when we don't know what in the world God is doing. Sometimes that's where our peace comes, and that's where our peace is maintained, because we know who God is. We know the character of God. We know that we are loved and valued by God. We know that God is merciful and God is just. We know that God is a strong tower and a warrior. We know that God will fight our battles and go before us. Sometimes we just need to remind ourselves of who God is until we get to the place of seeing what God is going to do, or the manifestation of what God has done on our behalf. So make sure you make worship a priority. And then do your part. Hannah goes back home. It says Elkanah knew Hannah. Well, we know what biblically knowing is. She did what was necessary to make a baby. She did what was necessary to make the baby that she prayed for. And so Hannah just simply does her part. And that's what we have to do. We've got to quit worrying about God's business, how God wants to move or do or predetermine how God is going to do all these things. Instead, we've got to do our part. And sometimes those are just the simple acts of obedience, the simple ways of living, the simple ways of honoring and glorify God in our everyday, mundane decisions of life, trusting God to do God's part even as we do ours. And finally, the story ends with verse 27 and 28, where it says, for this child I prayed. She brings the baby back to Shiloh after she has weaned him. And she offers the child to the Lord, and she says to Eli, for this child I have prayed, and the Lord has granted me the petition that I made to him. Therefore I have lent him to the Lord. As long as he lives, he is given to the Lord. And they worshiped the Lord there. The 7th and the final lesson: handle answered prayer with integrity. Hannah went before the Lord to ask for this child. She said that when God granted her this child, she would give that child in service to the Lord. And so she gave him to the Lord according to the original plan, according to what it was that she vowed and she prayed. Now, here's the thing, y'all. I don't think you need to bargain with God. I don't think you have to make some, deep vow or something. Lord, if you do this, then I'll do that. I don't think that that's necessary. I think sometimes it's implicit that when we ask God of something, that when God grants that petition, we use it in a way that glorifies and honors God. We use it in a way that is in service to God. And it might not be a one-to-one kind of thing, right? But we don't want to take the answered prayer and then use it in a way that's going to lead us away from God, as opposed to leading us to God, or allowing us to walk deeper in our relationship with God, or enable us to shine a light that more people could see God, so that however it is that God blesses us, and it doesn't have to be like some particular holy thing, but we prayed and we asked God to give us that job, or we asked God to give us that promotion. Well, how we walk in that job, how we handle that authority, authority, how we treat other people, kinds of things that we involve ourselves in or we say no to should also be things that are pleasing in the sight of God, right? That our character, that our integrity, that our discipline, that our work ethic are reflective of people who claim to follow Jesus Christ. And so what Hannah shows us is that when we pray and when that prayer is answered, then we then have a responsibility to handle that answered prayer with integrity and to use it according to a purpose that is indeed God honoring. And this doesn't have to be super spiritual, right? Doesn't have to be, all hyper Holy Ghost. Simply want to make sure that the things that God blesses us with lead us to God or help us show other people God. We don't want to be people for whom the blessing breaks us. For some of us, it's not the burden that's going to do it, because the burden drives us into the presence of God. When we are burdened, something is going wrong, we are right there with God. And for some of us, it's not going to be that. It's going to be the blessing. Because when the blessing comes, we start to think we don't need God. When the blessing comes, we start to think we can do it on our own. When the blessing comes, we think we earned it, that it's because of us. And then we start doing things only considering us. And so Hannah gives us these lessons so that we can see what it is to have the power of a praying woman. But when those prayers come through, we don't want to minimize or short circuit the power by misusing what God has given us. We want to make sure that we continue to stand as empowered women, remaining connected to God, women of integrity, that God can bless because God knows we can handle the blessing. It's a rough position to be in. For God to not be able to bless us like God wants to bless us, because the blessing simply gets us in trouble. So, look over these lessons that we have reviewed with Hannah and ask yourself, do I fight? Do I begin the fight on my knees? If I'm in a fight right now, how much of it have I spent on my knees? Am I putting my paninas in their place? I recognize that motives matter. What are my motives for some of the things that I'm seeking? And do I need God to purify them? How am I prioritizing my peace? What am I doing in order to release so that I can rise in peace? And how am I walking and interacting peaceably with others? Am I making sure I'm getting worship in other than a Sunday morning? How can I call my attention on a regular basis to who God is and lift my perspective and vision above everything that's around me? What is my part? Is there some part I need to be playing and doing, even as I wait for God to do God's part? And finally, consider the answered prayers you already have. How are you handling or managing those? Are you doing them with integrity, or are you allowing them or using them to lead you to places away from God instead of to God? That's our lesson for tonight. And next week, we are going to be looking at Abigail, and we're going to be talking about the power of a competent woman. And her story is found in 1 Samuel 25. So I encourage you to read that chapter before we meet again so that I can discuss the lessons that I see from Abigail so that we might have the power of a confident woman.